Chapter 1. Waking up to the illusion. Think about the sheer emotional exhaustion that sets in when you realize you have been pouring your entire soul into a relationship that gives almost nothing back in return. You are trying to connect with someone who initially seemed to have so much to offer, but who ultimately takes so much more than they ever give. It is a uniquely isolating experience, one that leaves your mind profoundly incoherent and your natural sense of vitality entirely drained. You might spend your days feeling frustrated, angry, demeaned, and helpless over the almost total lack of sensitivity and empathy they show for your most basic needs and feelings. And yet, you stay. You struggle to find the strength to either walk away or stand up to the captivating person you let into your life, whether they are a partner, a family member, or a colleague. To understand how you arrived at this deeply frustrating juncture, you have to look at the powerful illusion this personality type casts over the world. Imagine a scenario that might feel entirely too familiar. You are at a social gathering and the person you are with is holding court. They are captivating, spinning stories with effortless charisma, looking every bit like a modern-day knight in shining armor, armed with a handsome portfolio and dazzling acquisitions. Everyone around them is laughing, leaning in, completely enchanted by their brilliance and their perfectly curated aura of success. Or perhaps they present as the ultimate martyr, the domestic diva who seemingly does it all, flawlessly organizing community events and managing crises, all while making sure everyone knows exactly how much they sacrifice for others. They are the center of the universe, and you feel a strange sense of privilege just being allowed to orbit them. But then the event ends. You get into the car to drive home. The doors close, the engine starts, and the radiant warmth they just projected to a room full of strangers instantly evaporates. The silence in the car is heavy and cold. You casually mention that you had a difficult day. Perhaps you received some worrying news about a health issue or a severe stressor at work, seeking a simple moment of comfort. Instead of turning toward you with a listening ear, they sigh heavily, check their phone, and look visibly annoyed that you have interrupted their thoughts. They might completely ignore your distress, or worse, they might quickly flip the conversation to point out how your silly emotional needs are an inconvenience to them. In the blink of an eye, you have gone from being their prized companion to becoming completely invisible. This jarring bait and switch maneuver is the hallmark of the highly self-absorbed personality. They can make you feel as though you are the chosen one, the most special person in the room to have garnered their magnificent attention, only to suddenly plunge you into darkness while you blindly search for an exit sign. You are expected to buy the best seat in the house for their swaggering performance, to applaud loudly, to nod on cue, and to hold the spotlight firmly upon them. In return, you are absolutely never expected to ask to join them on the stage. When you dare to ask them to tune into your world, they become masterful escape artists, literally walking away mid-sentence or suddenly finding something much more important to attend to. Living with this illusion requires you to navigate a minefield of contradictions. You are dealing with someone who expects the world to bend to their will, someone who operates under the firm belief that they make the rules and they break the rules, while the rest of humanity must fall in line. They demand special attention from almost everyone and act as though ordinary limitations do not apply to them. Yet, beneath this towering bravado lies a shocking fragility. They are easily injured by the slightest hint of criticism, a differing point of view, or even your failure to offer them constant praise. When their ego is bruised, they do not show vulnerability. Instead, they become masterful cover-up artists who hurl the prickliest, most demeaning words at you, or retreat into a stone-walled, silent abyss. If you try to hold your ground, they will twist reality until your mind bends like a contortionist. You might start a conversation about a genuine hurt, only to find yourself subjected to a dizzying, long-winded monologue that expertly dodges the real issue. Before you know it, their relentless arguments and intellectual bullying have triggered your deepest self-doubts. Reduced to fear or utter exhaustion, you might find yourself surrendering, offering a groveling apology, and recanting your own opinions just to quell their unending rage and mend their tattered ego. You mute your own voice, carefully walking a narrow, eggshell-lined path to keep your own needs tucked safely out of sight. To truly understand the depth of this behavior, it is helpful to look back to the ancient tragic myth of the beautiful figure doomed to eternally fall in love with his own image, reflected in a mountain pool. Because he could only crave the image, but never actually possess it, he simply pined away. This is the tragic reality of the highly self-absorbed individual. They are preoccupied with a desperate need to achieve the perfect image of recognition, status, and superiority, leaving them with little to no capacity for listening, caring, or understanding the inner world of others. They cannot imagine walking in your shoes or feeling what it is like to live inside your skin. This lack of empathy, the sheer inability to tune into the emotional frequency of another human being, is what leaves you feeling so incredibly isolated, even when they are sitting right beside you. A relationship with such an individual feels fundamentally lopsided because every conversation and interaction is ultimately about them, never about you, and never about the two of you as a true partnership. You are not crazy for feeling provoked, insecure, intimidated, resentful, or powerless. You are not at fault for hoping that underneath their polished exterior there is a warm, loving person waiting to permanently emerge. You probably see flashes of it sometimes, a fleeting moment where their humanness manages to sneak out, showing up as warm and caring if only for a little while, or perhaps they show up unexpectedly with a truckload of roses after a terrible fight, making you feel entirely disposed to forgive their cloddish behavior. But the tragedy of the illusion is that nothing is ever enough to fill their chasm of insatiability. As quickly as they showed up, they slip away again, and it is always just a matter of time before they appear bored, disinterested, and emotionally checked out. To survive and ultimately reclaim your own life and sanity, the first critical step is to wake up from this powerful illusion. You must see their behavior for exactly what it is, stripping away the blinding glare of their charm and their accomplishments. You must recognize that the chronic loneliness and confusion you feel is not a reflection of your own inadequacy, but a direct result of their profound inability to truly connect. The grand performance is nothing more than a carefully constructed shield, and once you begin to understand the wounded reality that lies hidden behind that shield, your entire perspective will begin to shift. Chapter 2. The Wounded Child Behind the Armor. You might look at the person causing so much chaos in your life and wonder how someone so aggressively confident can simultaneously be so remarkably fragile. They project an impenetrable armor, moving through the world with an air of absolute superiority and a swaggering charm. Yet the slightest perceived slight, a difference of opinion, a missed compliment, or a gentle critique can send them into a spiral of defensive rage. To understand this baffling paradox, we have to look past the towering, intimidating adult standing in front of you. Once upon a time, this competitive braggart was simply a little child who had wants, needs, and feelings, just like every other child who enters the world. What could have possibly led that innocent child down a path toward an assumed rightful placement on center stage, where they believe the rules apply to everyone else, but never to them? Personality is deeply forged in the fires of our earliest environments. Consider the child who was completely spoiled, raised in a home where they were constantly indoctrinated with the belief that they were inherently better than everyone else and entitled to special privileges. They were overly indulged, never given limits, and never taught how to properly manage or tolerate the normal frustrations and discomforts of life. Or perhaps consider the dependent child whose parents were so intensely over-involved that they hovered over every obstacle, painstakingly removing any possibility of struggle or pain. Because their parents did everything for them, this child was tragically robbed of developing a true sense of personal competence. They grew up feeling entirely helpless, expecting others to take care of everything so they would never have to face the humiliation of making a bad decision or feeling like a failure. As adults, they carry this profound entitlement into every relationship, demanding that you manage the difficult, emotionally heavy parts of life while they reap the rewards. But perhaps the most common and heartbreaking origin story is that of the lonely, deprived child. Imagine growing up in a home where love was entirely conditional, treated as a cold transaction based strictly on performance. This child was taught that being anything short of absolute perfection meant they were fundamentally flawed, inadequate, and unlovable. Their parents may have subtly manipulated them, using the child's external achievements purely to stroke their own ego and pride, sending a clear message that the child was forbidden to ever embarrass the family with a less than stellar performance. When this child naturally sought warm comfort, physical affection, or simple empathy, they were met with emotional starvation, harsh discipline, or outright criticism. They were made to feel that there was something deeply wrong with them, as if wanting basic human comfort was a pathetic weakness. To survive this agonizing emotional deprivation and the profound sense of shame it created, the child built an impenetrable fortress around their heart. They adopted a fierce, lifelong survival mantra: I will need no one. Fast forward decades later, and that terrified, lonely child is now the adult sitting across from you. They still harbor an unacknowledged yearning for a deeply safe, emotionally intimate connection, but they view those very longings as unacceptable and weak. True intimacy feels like a stifling and dangerous trap where they fear they might lose their sovereign sense of self. So they hide. They don elaborate psychological masks to transform their hidden pain into a bearable, even comfortable experience. They might adopt the mask of the relentless bully, ensuring that no one can ever make them feel small again by proactively dominating everyone else. Or they might become the ultimate show-off, desperately craving constant applause as a temporary substitute for genuine love. The great tragedy of this defensive armor is that it actually perpetuates the exact feelings they are trying so hard to escape. By constantly pushing people away to avoid feeling defective or exposed, they continually recreate the very loneliness and isolation that wounded them in the first place. Not all of this armor is loud and aggressive. Sometimes this personality type shows up in highly camouflaged packaging, presenting themselves as morally self-righteous martyrs who are forever pointing out the right and wrong ways to live in the world. Think of someone you know who endlessly sacrifices their time, eagerly taking on burdens no one asked them to take, all while broadcasting exactly how incredibly selfless they are. They hide behind a thin veil of humble servitude, modestly claiming they do not need any praise for their philanthropic nature. But beneath this quiet performance is a ravenous appetite for recognition as an extraordinary human being. When the spotlight inevitably fades, or when people fail to offer them a prolonged standing ovation for their sacrifices, their resentment boils over. The stoic facade shatters, and they unleash a tantrum-like retort, punishing everyone around them with cold stares, deep sighs, and withering guilt trips to hoist themselves back onto their self-righteous throne. Understanding this deep psychological wounding brings up an important question. Is all self-focus inherently toxic? Surprisingly, the answer is no. There is such a thing as healthy narcissism, and it actually contains the vital seeds of assertiveness and self-respect. Every single child comes into the world with a natural, healthy capacity to be demanding, angry, and self-focused in order to survive and obtain vital comfort and protection. In a loving, grounded environment where discipline is balanced with deep connection, this healthy childhood self-focus gradually evolves into integrity, the beautiful art of making a promise and keeping it. It allows a person to articulate their needs with absolute clarity while still maintaining a deep, respectful sensitivity to the rights of others. Healthy adults can be charismatic, self-possessed, and fiercely determined. They can confront you and hold you accountable without ever assassinating your soul. The crucial difference is that a healthy person retains the capacity for deep empathy, whereas a toxic individual becomes so emotionally illiterate that they treat the people around them as objects to be managed rather than human beings to be understood. Why does all of this deep history matter to you, the person currently exhausted by their behavior? It matters because understanding the wounded child behind the armor is the master key to your own emotional liberation. When you realize that their condescension, their rage, and their endless demands have absolutely nothing to do with your inherent worth, their toxic spells begin to break. you stop taking their cruelty as an accurate reflection of your own inadequacy. You begin to see that their behavior is a frantic, lifelong performance designed to outrun a ghost from their past. By shifting your perspective, you step completely out of the line of fire. You are no longer fighting an invincible monster. You are simply observing an adult who is trapped in a tragic childhood defense mechanism. This vital shift in your perception drains away their power, paving the way for you to examine the deeper wiring of your own mind, to understand exactly why you get pulled into their orbit, and to finally discover how to rewrite the rules of engagement. Chapter 3. The Blueprint of Your Beliefs. Have you ever found yourself in the middle of a heated interaction, your heart racing, your hands trembling, and your mind going completely blank? You might walk away hours later, endlessly replaying the conversation in your head, suddenly armed with all the perfect assertive responses you wish you had said. You ask yourself, with a deep sense of frustration, why you always seem to freeze, fold, or completely lose your voice when this particular person challenges you. You know you are intelligent, capable, and articulate in almost every other area of your life. Yet, when faced with their towering arrogance or their sharp, condescending tone, all of your confidence instantly evaporates. To understand why your voice disappears exactly when you need it most, we have to explore the invisible psychological software running quietly in the background of your mind. Think of your mind as a highly sophisticated operating system. From the very moment you are born, this system begins recording data, trying to make sense of the world and your place within it. Long before you had the language to articulate your feelings, you were absorbing messages about whether the world was safe, whether your needs mattered, and what you had to do to secure love and protection. These early experiences do not just fade away into the past. They solidify into deeply ingrained life themes or emotional blueprints. These blueprints dictate what you believe about yourself, what you expect from other people, and how you automatically react when you feel threatened. They become the absolute, unquestioned truth of your reality, operating entirely outside of your conscious awareness. Let us look closely at how a specific blueprint is drafted, because it rarely happens overnight. Imagine a young child growing up in a household where the emotional weather is entirely unpredictable. Perhaps one parent was easily angered, emotionally volatile, or chronically overwhelmed by their own life. This child quickly learns that the environment is incredibly fragile. To survive and maintain any sense of peace, the child unconsciously decides to become the caretaker of the family's emotional state. They learn to read the room the moment they walk through the door, constantly scanning for tension. If the parent is upset, the child instantly becomes quiet, helpful, and invisible. They push their own needs for play, comfort, or attention deep down into the basement of their mind, because asking for anything might trigger an explosion or add to the parent's heavy burden. Over time, this survival strategy solidifies into a powerful emotional blueprint. My needs are a burden, and my only value lies in keeping other people happy and calm. Fast forward 20 or 30 years. That child is now a remarkably compassionate, highly responsible adult. They are the person everyone calls in a crisis, the ultimate team player, the endlessly forgiving partner. But their emotional software is still running the exact same ancient program. When they encounter someone who is demanding, intensely self-focused, and easily angered, their childhood blueprint immediately lights up. The brain recognizes the familiar environment of walking on eggshells and instantly deploys the old survival strategy: submit, accommodate, and quiet down. This is exactly why your mind goes blank and your voice vanishes when you are confronted by a highly difficult personality. You are not consciously choosing to surrender. Your psychological software is executing an emergency protocol that it believes is necessary to keep you safe from emotional harm. Now consider the profound collision that occurs when your blueprint meets the blueprint of the highly self-absorbed person. We have already explored how their psychological software was written, perhaps through extreme overindulgence, profound emotional deprivation, or conditional love. Their core blueprint tells them that the world is a stage, that they must aggressively demand the spotlight to avoid feeling invisible or defective. and that vulnerability is equal to death. When a person whose blueprint screams, "I must dominate to survive," meets a person whose blueprint whispers, "I must accommodate to survive," the attraction is almost magnetically irresistible. It is a perfect, tragic lock-and-key mechanism. The self-absorbed individual is drawn to your endless capacity for patience and your willingness to put their needs first. You provide the perfect, non-threatening audience for their grand performance. Conversely, your brain is strangely drawn to their overwhelming certainty and demanding presence because, on a deeply subconscious level, it feels like home. The brain has a profound bias for the familiar, even when the familiar is incredibly painful. Your internal software fundamentally believes that love and connection require you to sacrifice yourself and manage someone else's volatile emotions. So, when this chaotic dynamic begins to unfold, part of you feels exactly where you are supposed to be, tirelessly working to finally win the conditional approval that was just out of reach in your past. Understanding your own emotional blueprints is one of the most vital and empowering realizations you can possibly have. As long as these life themes remain hidden in the dark, they will continue to pull your strings like an invisible puppeteer. You will keep wondering why you cannot seem to set boundaries, why you tolerate unacceptable behavior, and why you feel so overwhelmingly guilty the second you try to stand up for yourself. The guilt is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is simply the alarm bell of your old software warning you that you are breaking the ancient childhood rules. You cannot delete these old blueprints. They are a permanent part of your history. But you absolutely can learn to recognize when they have been activated. The moment you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, the sudden urge to apologize when you have done nothing wrong, or the frantic need to fix their bad mood, you can stop and observe what is happening. You can say to yourself, "This is not the present reality. This is my old blueprint trying to protect a child who is no longer here." By bringing these hidden beliefs out into the light of your conscious awareness, you strip them of their automatic power. You begin the profound work of stepping out of the rigid, fearful reactions of the past, preparing yourself to finally meet the challenge in front of you as the grounded, powerful adult you are today. Chapter 4. The Mind's Hidden Archives. Think about the last time you tried to stand your ground with the highly self-absorbed person in your life. You likely rehearsed exactly what you were going to say. You practiced in the shower, you mapped out the logical points on your drive to work, and you felt completely prepared to calmly and rationally explain your perspective. But the moment you opened your mouth, something entirely out of your control happened. Perhaps they shot you a look of utter disgust, or they let out a sharp, mocking laugh, or they suddenly raised their voice and accused you of being entirely unreasonable. In a fraction of a second, your carefully constructed logic completely vanished. Your heart began to hammer violently against your ribs, your breathing became shallow, your palms sweat, and a thick fog rolled over your brain. You stood there, mouth slightly open, entirely unable to access the brilliant arguments you had prepared just an hour before. Later, replaying the event in the safety of your own room, you likely felt a crushing wave of shame. You asked yourself why you always surrender, why you are so weak, and why you can never just defend yourself. To finally release yourself from that agonizing shame, you must understand a profound truth. Your failure to speak up in that moment was not a flaw in your character. It was an absolute triumph of your biology. While the previous chapter explored the psychological software of your mind, your deeply held beliefs and life traps, this chapter explores your hardware. Deep beneath the sophisticated, rational part of your brain lies an ancient, primitive piece of machinery. It is an alarm system designed millions of years ago, and its single, overriding mission is to keep you alive. When this ancient watchman perceives a threat, it does not stop to analyze the nuance of human interaction or the intricacies of a modern relationship. It simply slams the emergency button, completely shutting down the rational thinking part of your brain and flooding your body with survival chemicals. Imagine you're walking through a dense, unfamiliar forest, and you suddenly hear the sharp snap of a twig directly behind you. You do not stand there and ponder whether it is a harmless squirrel or a dangerous predator, Before you even have a conscious thought, your body has already shifted into a state of high alert. Your muscles tense, ready to run or fight. This is the exact same biological sequence that happens when you are confronted by the overwhelming intensity of a deeply self-centered individual. When they puff up their chest, raise their voice, or use a tone dripping with condescension, your primitive brain does not see a difficult partner, a demanding boss, or an aging parent. It sees a massive, terrifying predator. It calculates that engaging in a logical debate with a predator is a terrible strategy for survival. So it takes the wheel. The human body generally has three main biological responses to a severe threat: fight, flight, or freeze. In the face of a towering, volatile personality, the fight response is often recognized by the brain as a losing battle. The flight response is frequently impossible. You cannot simply run away from the dinner table or sprint out of a moving car, and so your magnificent ancient brain chooses the most reliable survival tactic left. It freezes. Just like a small animal playing dead to lose the interest of a predator, your body shuts down your vocal cords, numbs your emotions, and creates a mental blankness. You nod your head, you apologize, you go perfectly still, and you wait for the danger to pass. The freeze response feels incredibly humiliating to your modern adult mind, but it is actually your body doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting you from an overwhelming threat. But why does this specific person trigger your alarm system so intensely, while other difficult people might merely annoy you? To answer this, we have to look at how the body stores its history. There is a deeply hidden filing cabinet in your mind, completely separate from the part of your brain that remembers facts, dates, or specific childhood stories. This is the archive of implicit memory. Implicit memory does not record the narrative of what happened to you. It records the physical sensation of what happened. If you grew up in an environment where you felt chronically unsafe, deeply dismissed, or completely powerless against an unpredictable adult, your body logged the exact physical feeling of that terror. It remembered the tone of voice that preceded the anger. It remembered the specific tightening of the facial muscles before the criticism landed. Decades later, you are a capable, intelligent adult. You might have consciously forgotten the specific details of those early childhood experiences, but your nervous system has not forgotten a single thing. When the difficult person in your life sighs heavily, rolls their eyes, or uses a specific punishing tone of voice, they unknowingly pick the lock on your hidden archives. The implicit memory floods your system. In a fraction of a millisecond, your brain time travels. You're no longer a grown adult standing in a modern kitchen or a corporate boardroom. Biologically, you are a small, defenseless child standing before an unpredictable giant. Your nervous system is reacting to a ghost from the past, completely superimposed over the face of the person in the present. This profound biological reality explains why all the communication techniques, the clever comebacks, and the logical boundaries you try to set completely fail when you are in the heat of the moment. You cannot use logic when the logical center of your brain has literally been unplugged by your survival instincts. You are trying to use words and reason to fight a nervous system that is preparing for physical combat. It is like trying to put out a roaring house fire with a beautifully written essay. Understanding your biological hardware is arguably the most compassionate gift you can give yourself on this journey. When you realize that your pounding heart, your stuttering words, and your instinct to submit are ancient survival mechanisms, the heavy burden of self-blame begins to lift. You can look at your own physical reactions with deep respect rather than bitter frustration. You can begin to say to yourself, my body thinks I am in physical danger right now. My body is trying to protect me. This awareness is the crucial turning point. Because while you cannot permanently disable your biological alarm system, you can learn to recognize when it is sounding a false alarm. You can learn the vital physical skills required to soothe your nervous system, coax your rational brain back online, and anchor yourself firmly in the present moment. Only then, once the ancient watchman has been calmed, can you begin to navigate the complex, emotionally charged minefield of the actual relationship. Chapter 5. why we stay and why we break. There is a question that well-meaning friends, concerned family members, and even your own exhausted mind will eventually ask you. It is a simple question, usually delivered with a mix of frustration and profound confusion. Why do you not just leave? If this relationship is so draining, if this person makes you feel so invisible, and if the environment is so incredibly toxic, why do you stay? The people asking this question often view the situation in black and white. They assume that walking away from a painful dynamic should be as easy as stepping out of a burning building. But if you have spent months, years, or even decades entangled with a deeply self-absorbed individual, you know the absolute truth. The door is not locked from the outside. It is locked from the inside, secured by an intricate, invisible web of your own deepest vulnerabilities. To understand the magnetic pull that keeps you anchored in such an exhausting dynamic, we have to look away from the difficult person for a moment and turn the mirror gently toward you. People who find themselves continuously trapped in the orbit of a highly demanding, self-centered personality are rarely weak, foolish, or naive. In fact, they are almost always the exact opposite. They are highly conscientious, deeply compassionate, and profoundly empathetic individuals. But this beautiful empathy often houses a silent, destructive trap. You might operate under the deeply held belief that true love is measured by how much of yourself you are willing to give away. You believe that if you just try a little harder, love them a little better, or sacrifice just a bit more of your own comfort, you can finally heal their brokenness and unlock the warm, loving partner you know is hiding inside. Imagine a life built entirely around this philosophy of endless giving. You slowly, almost imperceptibly, begin to fold away the edges of your own life to make room for their towering presence. First, you might quietly drop a hobby that takes up too much of the weekend, because they may passing passive-aggressive comment about feeling neglected. Then you stop sharing your own workplace triumphs because every time you bring up your success, they suddenly develop a headache or quickly change the subject back to their own infinitely more important stress. Over the years, you prune away your friendships, your personal ambitions, and your very voice, meticulously sculpting yourself into the perfect, low-maintenance companion. You convince yourself that this is simply what compromise looks like. You tell yourself that you are the strong one, the emotional anchor capable of carrying the weight of two human beings. But this is not compromise. This is suicide. The suicide was this emotional self-immolation. You are burning yourself down to keep someone else warm, and you are terrified to stop because you believe that if you stop giving, you will cease to have any value at all. This deep-seated need to sacrifice perfectly complements another invisible lock, the haunting fear of your own defectiveness. For many people caught in this cycle, there is a quiet, persistent whisper in the back of their mind telling them that they are fundamentally flawed. Perhaps you absorbed this message in childhood, or perhaps it was slowly carved into your psyche through years of subtle criticism in your current relationship. This whisper convinces you that you're entirely too difficult, too sensitive, or too demanding to be loved by anyone else. When the difficult person in your life throws you a crumb of affection, a sudden compliment, an unexpectedly grand gesture, or a rare moment of genuine warmth, it feels incredibly intoxicating. It is like finding an oasis in a sprawling, emotional desert. Your brain latches onto that single, fleeting moment of kindness and uses it as absolute proof that they really do love you and that the rest of the painful days are somehow your own fault. You stay because you are playing an emotional slot machine, constantly pulling the lever and enduring 100 inevitable losses just to experience the sheer, overwhelming relief of that one rare jackpot. And then there is the ultimate barrier to walking away. The profound, paralyzing fear of the unknown. Leaving a relationship, even a highly destructive one, requires you to step off a familiar ledge into complete darkness. For all the pain, frustration, and loneliness you feel within the relationship, it is at least a pain that you know how to navigate. You have memorized their moods, you have mapped out the minefield, and you know exactly how to walk on the eggshells without breaking them. The thought of leaving means facing the terrifying prospect of true solitude. It means untangling finances, dividing families, or simply facing the heavy, silent emptiness of an apartment where no one else lives. The brain will almost always choose the misery it knows over the mystery it does not. It will convince you that being treated poorly is still vastly superior to being entirely alone in the world, but no human spirit can endure starvation forever. No matter how deeply you bury your needs, and no matter how skillfully you rationalize their behavior, there almost always comes a breaking point. The fascinating thing about this breaking point is that it is rarely the result of a massive, cinematic explosion. It is usually not born from the worst fight you have ever had or the most egregious insult they have ever hurled at you. The breaking point is almost always remarkably quiet. It happens on an ordinary Tuesday morning while you are pouring coffee, or while you are sitting in your car in the driveway, staring blankly at the steering wheel before walking into the house. In that quiet moment, the heavy fog of illusion simply lifts. You look at the life you have built, and you realize with absolute chilling clarity that you do not recognize the person you have become. You realize that your exhaustion is no longer just physical, it's a profound, soul-deep fatigue. You recognize that you have spent years waiting for a train on a track that was dismantled decades ago. The hope that they will miraculously wake up one day, recognize your sacrifices, and magically transform into a deeply empathetic partner finally, permanently dies. This breaking point is terrifying, but it is also the most sacred, powerful moment of your entire journey. The death of false hope is the exact moment true liberation begins. When you finally stop trying to fix them, stop trying to perform for them, and stop taking the blame for their profound limitations, the energy you spent holding up their universe suddenly rushes back into your own body. You realize that the question is no longer about whether they will ever change. The only question that matters now is what you are going to do with the beautiful, singular life you have left to live. The lock on the inside of the door has finally clicked open, and for the first time in a very long time, your hand is resting firmly on the doorknob. Chapter 6. Navigating the Minefield. So here you stand, armed with a profound new understanding of your own inner workings and a clear vision of the wounded reality hiding behind their impenetrable armor. You know that their towering rage is a shield, and you know that your instinct to surrender is an echo of an ancient survival mechanism. But understanding the theory of a storm is very different from standing in the pouring rain. The ultimate test of your new awareness does not happen in the quiet safety of your own mind. It happens on an ordinary Thursday evening when you are standing in the kitchen and they suddenly launch a completely unreasonable accusation at you. How do you bridge the massive gap between knowing the truth in your heart and actually holding your ground in the real world? You must learn how to navigate the incredibly volatile conversational minefield without losing your footing. The journey through this minefield begins with a fundamental, powerful shift in your perspective. You must transition from being a frantic participant in the chaos to becoming a silent, grounded observer. Imagine that you are sitting in a theater watching a highly dramatic movie, rather than actually acting in the scene yourself. When the difficult person in your life begins to escalate, when their voice rises, their eyes narrow, and they hurl a condescending remark in your direction, your automatic instinct will be to dive straight into the trenches with them. You will want to frantically defend yourself, logically explain why they are wrong, or completely surrender just to make the punishing tension stop. You must do none of these things. Instead, you take a slow, deep breath, and you step back into the role of the observer. From this vantage point, you begin a rapid internal assessment of the situation. You watch their grand performance unfold, but this time you are not hypnotized by it. You look past the cutting words and the aggressive posture, and you search for the emotional trigger that set them off. Did you inadvertently challenge their authority? Did someone else receive praise that they felt they deserved? Did you ask them to engage in an emotional conversation that made them feel vulnerable and therefore terrified? By assessing the situation objectively, you strip the interaction of its mystery. You realize that their outburst is not a random, chaotic attack against your soul. It is a highly predictable, mechanical reaction to a perceived threat to their fragile ego. As you observe their reaction, you must simultaneously turn your attention inward for the crucial step of identification. This is where you bravely face your own biological and psychological responses in real time. You feel the familiar sickening drop in your stomach. You notice the sudden flush of heat in your cheeks and the frantic, shallow rhythm of your breathing. Your old internal software is desperately lighting up, screaming at you that you are in danger, that you are being a bad partner or a difficult friend, and that you must immediately apologize to restore the peace. In the past, you would have blindly obeyed this internal alarm. Now, you simply identify it. You speak to yourself in the quiet confines of your own mind, saying, "There is my old fear. My heart is racing because my childhood blueprint has been activated. I feel like a terrified child, but I am actually a safe, powerful adult." This active identification naturally leads to the most liberating mechanism of all: differentiation. Differentiation is the profound ability to draw a firm, invisible boundary between where you end and they begin. It is the deep internal knowing that their projected reality is not your actual truth. To truly understand the power of differentiation, imagine a scenario where you are collaborating with this person on a significant project. Perhaps you are organizing a complex community event together, or managing a major renovation. You have both spent weeks preparing. One afternoon, you gently suggest a slight modification to the timeline because you have noticed a logistical flaw. It is a perfectly reasonable, helpful observation, but instantly the atmosphere in the room drops below freezing. They do not just disagree with your timeline, they launch a full-scale assault on your competence. They might laugh mockingly and tell you that if you possessed any real vision, you would not make such a remarkably amateur suggestion. They might accuse you of constantly trying to undermine their leadership and ruin the entire project. In the old days, this aggressive, dizzying response would have completely unmoored you. You would have questioned your own intelligence, felt a crushing wave of guilt for ruining their mood, and scrambled to retract your idea. But not today. Today, you engage your new tools. You stand quietly and observe the sudden inflation of their ego, assessing that your logical suggestion accidentally triggered their profound fear of not being the absolute, unquestioned authority. You identify the tightening in your own chest as your old survival mechanism begging you to submit, and then you differentiate. You look at their anger, and you consciously decide not to absorb it. You tell yourself their cruel words are a desperate defense mechanism. Their inability to handle a simple logistical change is their limitation, not my failure. I know my idea was sound. I know I am competent. You let their toxic energy hit the invisible shield of your boundary and slide harmlessly to the floor. Once you have successfully anchored yourself, you are ready to handle the inevitable communication glitches that this personality type uses to derail every meaningful conversation. Trying to argue with them is like trying to hold water in your bare hands. It constantly slips through your fingers. When they feel cornered by your calm presence, they will instinctively try to destabilize you. They will throw out wild red herrings, abruptly changing the subject to something entirely unrelated. They will dig into the past and suddenly bring up a mistake you made 5 years ago, using it as absolute proof that you are perpetually flawed. They might employ brilliant, exhausting word salad, spinning you in intellectual circles until you completely forget what you were originally trying to discuss. They do this because if they can confuse you, exhaust you, or provoke you into losing your temper, they regain the upper hand. Your strategy here is absolute, unwavering stillness. You must become the calmest person in the room. When they try to shift the topic to your past mistakes, you do not take the bait. You do not launch into a passionate defense of what happened 5 years ago. Instead, you become a broken record of serene focus. You say evenly and softly, "We can certainly discuss that another time, if it's important to you, but right now we are talking about the project timeline." If they raise their voice, you lower yours. If they try to twist your words, you do not frantically try to untangle their logic. You simply state your truth once, clearly. And then you stop talking. Silence is the most potent, disarming weapon you possess in the minefield. The highly self-absorbed person feeds on your emotional reactions. They need your frantic explanations, your tears, and your visible frustration to fuel their sense of superiority and control. When you respond with calm, grounded silence, you completely cut off their emotional oxygen supply. You refuse to perform your assigned role in their chaotic play. It will feel incredibly uncomfortable at first, and they may initially escalate their behavior in a desperate attempt to force you back into your old compliant patterns. But if you hold your ground, observing, assessing, identifying, and differentiating, you will slowly alter the entire landscape of the relationship. You will stop fighting a war you were never meant to win, and you will begin to navigate the space with absolute, unshakable dignity. Chapter 7. The Anchor in the Storm. When you are standing in the direct path of a highly self-absorbed person whose emotions are rapidly escalating, you might feel as though you have been caught in the middle of a violent hurricane. The wind is howling, the ground is shaking, and every instinct tells you to either run for cover or scream back into the gale. But a ship does not survive a hurricane by trying to fight the wind, nor does it survive by simply hoping the water will calm down. A ship survives because of a heavy, immovable anchor that bites deep into the ocean floor, holding it steady no matter how violently the waves crash against the hull. In the chaotic, unpredictable world of navigating this difficult relationship, you must become your own anchor. This profound state of emotional presence, a deep and unshakable mindfulness, is the only way to disarm the various defensive masks they wear without losing your own footing. To effectively hold your ground, you must first recognize that the difficult person does not always attack in the exact same way. They possess a wardrobe of psychological masks, each designed to protect their fragile inner child from the perceived threat of vulnerability or exposure. The most common and perhaps the most exhausting of these is the mask of the relentless performer. Think of a scenario where you are at a quiet dinner trying to celebrate a friend's recent promotion, and the self-absorbed individual instantly hijack the conversation. They loudly recount their own vastly superior achievements, completely monopolizing the air in the room, seamlessly turning someone else's moment of joy into their own personal stage. The instinct is usually to roll your eyes, quietly resent them, or perhaps aggressively shut them down, which only fuels their desperation for attention. To disarm the performer, your anchor must be forged in empathic firmness. You remain completely calm, refusing to offer the mindless applause they are demanding. Instead, you look at them and gently but firmly acknowledge their underlying drive, perhaps saying something like, "It is wonderful that you have achieved so much, but right now we are going to focus on celebrating our friend." By doing this, you do not humiliate them, but you absolutely refuse to surrender the stage. Sometimes the mask they wear is far more dangerous and intimidating. This is the mask of the bully, a deeply menacing defense mechanism designed to control the environment through sheer terror and unpredictability. Imagine a perfectly normal morning where a minor inconvenience occurs. Perhaps you misplaced a household item or took a slightly longer route while driving. The bully does not just express frustration, they erupt. They use a punishing tone, towering over you, unleashing a torrent of deeply personal insults intended to make you feel completely incompetent and small. Their goal is to force you into submission, because if you are terrified, you cannot possibly threaten their authority. Disarming the bully requires the absolute strongest version of your anchor. You cannot fight fire with fire, and you cannot cower. You must stand tall, keep your breathing slow and steady, and project an aura of absolute safety and unyielding boundaries. You might look them directly in the eye and state, with an incredibly calm and unwavering voice, that you will not participate in a conversation where you are being spoken to in that manner, and then you physically leave the room. You do not explain, you do not argue, and you do not negotiate with their rage. You simply remove their target, leaving their aggression to burn itself out in an empty room. Another highly manipulative disguise is the mask mask of the entitled royalty. This version of the personality does not necessarily yell or perform. Instead, they operate under the quiet, absolute conviction that the normal rules of human decency simply do not apply to them. Picture someone who constantly expects you to radically alter your schedule to accommodate their whims, yet is permanently unavailable the moment you require a favor. When you finally say no to one of their outrageous demands, they do not explode. Instead, they punish you with a chilling, prolonged silence, a heavy sulking that is designed to flood you with guilt until you eventually break down and apologize for failing them. The anchor required here is the serene refusal to comply. When they deploy their icy silence, you do not chase them, you do not send frantic messages asking what is wrong, and you do not scramble to fix their mood. You calmly go about your day, radiating the quiet confidence of someone who knows they have done absolutely nothing wrong. You let them sit in the discomfort of their own making. Once they realize that their sulking will not manipulate you into compliance, the strategy loses its power entirely. Finally, you will often encounter the mask of the great avoider, the addictive self-soother. When the emotional temperature in the relationship begins to rise, when you ask for a genuine connection, a deep conversation, or a resolution to an ongoing problem, this person simply vanishes. They do not leave the house, but they disappear into a fortress of distractions. They bury themselves in endless hours of work. They numb themselves with alcohol or substances, or they become hypnotically glued to a glowing screen for the entire evening. They build a wall of profound unavailability to shield themselves from the terrifying prospect of emotional intimacy. It is incredibly painful to sit next to someone who is physically present but emotionally a million miles away. Your old instinct might be to pull at their sleeve, to beg for their attention, or to start a fight just to get some kind of reaction, but your anchor teaches you a different way. You name the absence, calmly stating that you see they are choosing to check out, and then you let go of the rope. You stop trying to drag them into a connection they are actively resisting. Instead, you turn your beautiful, vibrant energy back toward your own life, your own passions, and your own peace. Mastering the use of this anchor completely changes the dynamic of the relationship. You are no longer a leaf blown around by the chaotic winds of their moods, their demands, or their hidden fears. You begin to walk through the world with a profound sense of internal security. You know that you cannot control which mask they will decide to wear today, but you also know with absolute certainty that it no longer matters, because no matter what performance they put on, what insults they hurl, or what silent treatment they deploy, you know exactly who you are. You have cultivated a deep, quiet power that they cannot touch, manipulate, or destroy. You are anchored. And from this place of unshakable strength, you are finally ready to confront the hardest question of all, deciding exactly what kind of behavior you will allow in your life and finding the profound courage required to enforce your ultimate boundaries. Chapter 8. The Courage to Walk Away. There is a profound difference between a difficult relationship and a dangerous one. Up until this point, we have explored the intricate ways to understand, navigate, and firmly manage a highly self-absorbed personality. We have talked about finding your footing, dropping your anchor, and refusing to participate in their chaotic emotional theater, but we must now confront the hardest, most sobering truth of this entire journey. Some storms cannot be weathered. Sometimes no amount of empathy, understanding, or perfectly executed communication will save the connection. In some cases, the person standing across from you is not just wounded and defensive. They are fundamentally toxic to your physical, emotional, or psychological survival. Acknowledging this reality requires a tremendous amount of bravery because it forces you to abandon the romantic, deeply ingrained notion that love and patience can conquer absolutely anything. To recognize when a relationship has crossed the line from challenging to perilous, you must look closely at the nature of the control being exerted over you. Imagine a scenario that begins so subtly, You might mistake it for deep devotion. You enter a partnership with someone who seems fiercely protective of you. At first, they simply want to spend all their time with you, gently suggesting that your friends do not understand the special bond you share, or that your family is too demanding of your time. Slowly, under the guise of creating an impenetrable fortress of love just for the two of you, they begin to sever your outside connections. Next comes the subtle financial control. Perhaps they convince you that they are simply better at managing the accounts, slowly restricting your access to your own resources until you find yourself having to ask permission to buy basic necessities. If you ever question this arrangement, they do not just argue, they unleash a terrifying cold rage, accusing you of ultimate betrayal. Before you fully realize what has happened, you wake up in a world where you're entirely isolated, entirely dependent, and walking on a floor made of eggshells that shatter at the slightest shift in the breeze. This is not a communication glitch. This is not a wounded child acting out because they missed a compliment. This is a systematic, intentional dismantling of your autonomy. When a person uses fear, isolation, intimidation, or any form of physical or severe emotional abuse to maintain absolute dominance, the rules of engagement completely change. You cannot use mindfulness and empathy to negotiate with someone who is actively trying to extinguish your spirit. In these deeply perilous situations, the goal is no longer to improve the relationship or disarm their ego. The singular overriding goal is to protect your life and your sanity. One of the most insidious traps that keeps people locked in these irredeemable situations is the illusion of the turning point. This is the desperate, heartbreaking belief that if you can just endure one more crisis, one more explosive argument, or one more crushing disappointment, you will finally reach the moment where they wake up and realize the error of their ways. The highly toxic individual is often a master at keeping this illusion alive. Just as you reach your absolute breaking point and quietly pack your bags in your mind, they sense the shift in the atmosphere. Suddenly, the monster disappears, and the charming, contrite partner returns. They offer a tearful apology, they make grand promises about therapy and change, and they shower you with the exact kind of affection you have been starving for. Your beautiful, empathetic heart wants to believe them. You desperately want the nightmare to be over. But this honeymoon phase is not a turning point. It is simply part of the cycle of abuse. It is a calculated maneuver designed to hit the reset button on your tolerance. As soon as you unpack your bags and let your guard down, the tension slowly begins to build again, and inevitably the explosion returns, often worse than before. Recognizing this cycle for what it is, a mechanical, repetitive trap rather than a genuine path to redemption, is the first necessary step in gathering the courage to walk away. Leaving a highly enmeshed, deeply toxic dynamic is rarely a single cinematic event where you deliver a perfect speech and walk out the door into a sunny new life. It is often a quiet, terrifying, and intensely strategic process. When you realize that the relationship is fundamentally unsafe, you must stop trying to explain your feelings to them. A person who benefits from your subjugation will never validate your reasons for leaving. If you try to seek closure or demand that they understand the pain they have caused, you simply hand them another opportunity to manipulate, confuse, and emotionally destabilize you. You must accept that you will likely never receive the apology you deserve, and you must find a way to make peace with leaving the story unfinished in their eyes. Drawing the hard line requires you to meticulously build your own exit strategy in the quiet privacy of your own mind, often long before you make a physical move. It means quietly reaching out to the friends and family you were forced to abandon, admitting the truth of your situation, and asking for help. It means securing your finances, gathering your important documents, and knowing exactly where you will go when the moment arrives. It requires you to treat your departure not as a negotiation, but as a non-negotiable fact. The courage required for this is monumental, because your mind will fight you every step of the way. Your old blueprints will scream that you are making a terrible mistake, that you are a failure for giving up, and that you will never survive on your own. You must meet those fears with absolute, unyielding compassion. You tell yourself that choosing your own safety over someone else's comfort is not a failure of love. It is the ultimate triumph of self-respect. You remind yourself that walking away from a burning building does not mean you do not care about the building. It simply means you recognize that staying will turn you to ash. The courage to walk away is born in the quiet, sacred moment when you look at the terrifying expanse of the unknown future and finally decide that it is vastly superior to the agonizing, soul-crushing certainty of the present. It is the moment you reclaim the pen and write the final period on a chapter that was meant to break you, allowing yourself to finally turn the page and begin the profound work of healing in the light. Chapter 9. The Power of Compassionate Boundaries. Not every difficult relationship demands a permanent exit. While some situations are profoundly unsafe and require the courage to walk away entirely, the reality of human life is remarkably complex. Many of the people who drain our energy, dismiss our needs, and exhaust our patience are people we cannot, or consciously choose not to, simply erase from our lives. They are aging parents whose health is failing, co-parents with whom we share the deepest responsibility of raising children, or long-term business partners deeply entangled in our financial survival. If you have recognized that the person in your life is not fundamentally dangerous, but rather deeply wounded and endlessly frustrating, you are faced with a monumental task. You must learn how to stay in the room without shrinking yourself to fit into their shadow. You must learn the delicate, immensely powerful art of demanding absolute respect, while simultaneously holding space for their brokenness. When most people think of setting boundaries, they imagine a brick wall. They picture a scene of aggressive confrontation, characterized by raised voices, rigid ultimatums, and a cold, impenetrable emotional fortress. We are often taught that to be strong, we must be hardened, and that to protect ourselves, we must completely shut the other person out. But when you are dealing with a highly self-absorbed, deeply defensive personality, a brick wall is often the absolute worst structure you can build. If you confront them with cold rigidity and harsh criticism, you instantly validate their deepest unspoken fear. The fear that the world is a hostile place and that everyone is out to humiliate them. Their biological alarm system will trigger, their armor will slam shut, and they will retaliate with blinding rage or icy withdrawal. Your boundary will be lost in the ensuing chaotic warfare. To break this exhausting cycle, you need a different kind of weapon. You need a boundary that functions more like a permeable membrane, strong enough to keep the toxicity out, but capable of letting profound human connection pass through. This is achieved through the practice of empathic confrontation. Empathic confrontation feels entirely counterintuitive at first because it requires you to hold two completely opposing truths in your mind at the exact same time. The first truth is the absolute, non-negotiable reality of your own boundary. Their behavior is unacceptable, it is causing harm, and it must stop. The second truth is the deep, compassionate recognition of their inner pain. They are acting this way because they are fundamentally terrified, running from a history of deprivation, conditional love, or overwhelming inadequacy. Empathic confrontation means that you look past the roaring dragon and speak directly to the frightened child hiding inside the beast, all while firmly demanding that the dragon stop breathing fire. Imagine a scenario that tests the very limits of your patience. You are engaged in a long-term commercial project with a partner who constantly undermines you. Every time you make a decision in front of your shared team or clients, this partner instantly jumps in to correct you, improve your idea, or subtly mock your contribution. It is humiliating, and it actively destroys your credibility. The natural instinct is to wait until you are behind closed doors and unleash your perfectly justified anger. You are a controlling, arrogant tyrant who never listens to anyone, and I am sick of being treated like an idiot. But if you deploy that anger, the partner will instantly view you as an attacker. They will launch into a dizzying defense of their superior intellect, accuse you of being ungrateful, and the conversation will end in a bitter, unresolved stalemate. Now, imagine stepping into that exact same room armed with empathic confrontation. You wait for a moment of relative calm. You ensure your voice is steady, completely stripped of sarcasm or venom. You look them in the eye, and you begin with the empathy. You say, "I know how incredibly much this project means to you. I know you carry a massive amount of anxiety about it succeeding. reading, and I deeply respect how desperately you want every single detail to be absolutely perfect. I know it feels like if you do not control everything, it might all fall apart. Notice what happens in that crucial first step. You have not attacked them. You have not called them controlling. Instead, you have accurately named their hidden, driving fear. When you do this, a profound biological shift occurs in their brain. Their threat detection system, constantly scanning for criticism, suddenly powers down. They feel seen, perhaps for the very first time. They feel that you are standing beside them, looking at the problem, rather than standing across from them preparing for battle. The armor lowers just a fraction of an inch, and in that precise, narrow opening, you deliver the boundary. You seamlessly continue. But when you override my decisions in front of the team, and when you correct me in public, it completely destroys my authority. It makes me feel entirely devalued as a partner. I am fully committed to the success of this project, but I cannot and will not continue to work in an environment where my contributions are publicly dismissed. From now on, if you disagree with my approach, I need you to discuss it with me in private. You have not negotiated. You have not apologized for your feelings. You have delivered a mandate of absolute respect, but you have wrapped it in a layer of profound, undeniable human understanding. The immediate aftermath of an empathic confrontation is rarely cinematic perfection. Do not expect them to suddenly break down in tears, admit all their faults, and thank you for your profound wisdom. Their initial reaction might still be a brief flash of defense, a heavy sigh, or an awkward, uncomfortable silence. The ego does not surrender its territory easily, but the wedge has been successfully driven into the armor. Because you did not attack their core character, they have no justification to launch a full-scale counterattack. They are forced to sit with the reality of your boundary, stripped of their usual chaotic distractions. Mastering this language requires intense practice, because it completely contradicts our natural fight-or-flight instincts. You must diligently prepare your opening statements, ensuring they are rooted in genuine understanding rather than passive-aggressive judgment. Saying, "I know you had a hard childhood," is an attack disguised as psychology. Saying, "I can see how overwhelming this situation feels to you right now," is true empathy. The difference is subtle in language, but monumental in impact. As you continuously deploy these compassionate boundaries, something remarkable begins to happen within the landscape of the relationship. You stop feeling like a victim of their unpredictable storms, and you start operating as a grounded, masterful navigator of the human condition. You realize that you hold the incredible power to de-escalate tension without ever compromising your own dignity. You create an environment where the other person is finally held completely accountable for their actions, yet somehow feels safer with you than they do with almost anyone else in the world. They begin to learn, slowly and clumsily, that they do not need to perform, dominate, or intimidate to secure their place in your life. By refusing to engage in their war, and by insisting on speaking to their humanity, you offer them the rarest and most beautiful gift of all, the opportunity to finally put down their heavy armor and simply breathe. Chapter 10. The Ultimate Gifts of Connection. There is a profound, quiet shift that happens when you finally stop trying to control the weather and simply learn how to build a better shelter. For so long, your entire emotional ecosystem was desperately tied to the behavioral forecast of the deeply self-absorbed person in your life. If they woke up in a generous, charming mood, the sun was shining, and you were allowed to feel safe. If they woke up gripped by their hidden fears and armored in their condescending rage, the storm clouds rolled in and your entire day was consumed by frantic damage control. But as you practice the art of stepping out of the line of fire, as you learn to drop your anchor and deploy compassionate boundaries, a magnificent realization begins to dawn on you. You realize that your personal peace, your joy, and your fundamental sense of worth are no longer dependent on their transformation. You have reclaimed the keys to your own life. The journey to this point is incredibly arduous, but it yields beautiful, unexpected rewards that forever alter the way you move through the world. The first and most vital reward is the absolute liberation from the outcome. In the past, whenever you tried to communicate an important feeling or set a boundary, your primary goal was to force them to understand you. You wanted them to validate your pain, to admit their wrongdoing, and to magically offer the empathy they were entirely incapable of giving. When they inevitably failed to do so, when they deflected, blamed you, or walked away, you felt entirely defeated. Your communication felt like a failure because it did not produce the result you desperately craved. But true internal power completely redefines the purpose of communication. Think of two brothers who have shared a fierce, deeply ingrained rivalry since they were small children. For decades, every interaction has been a silent competition over who is more successful, who makes better choices, and who ultimately wins the game of life. The older brother, driven by a profound need to be the undisputed center of attention, constantly belittles the younger brother's decisions, turning family dinners into an exhausting arena of intellectual dominance. For years, the younger brother fought back, endlessly presenting logical arguments to prove his own worth, trapped in a desperate cycle to win a war that was designed to be unwinnable. Then, one day, the younger brother simply stops playing. The next time the older brother launches into a condescending lecture designed to provoke a reaction, the younger brother does not raise his voice. He does not pull up past examples or defend his intelligence. He simply smiles, takes a deep breath, and calmly states that he is perfectly happy with his own choices, refusing to engage the argument any further. The older brother might scoff, roll his eyes, or try to escalate the tension, but the younger brother remains perfectly still. The profound gift in this moment is not that the older brother suddenly changed his ways or offered a heartfelt apology. The gift is the younger brother's absolute freedom. He communicated to honor his own authentic voice, not to control his brother's reaction. When you stop needing the other person to concede, their resistance entirely loses its power to hurt you. This liberation opens the door to a second monumental gift: the restoration of your creative and emotional energy. Managing the fragile ego of a highly demanding personality is an invisible, full-time job. It drains your vitality, leaving you with barely enough energy to survive the day, let alone pursue your own passions. When you finally release that burden, the energy floods back into your own life like a river bursting through a dam. Imagine pouring your absolute heart and soul into renovating a space. Perhaps you are meticulously building custom furniture with your own hands for a commercial shop, painstakingly selecting the perfect warm color combinations to make the environment feel incredibly welcoming and vibrant. You spend weeks laboring over every detail, deeply proud of the beautiful reality you're carving out of raw materials. Then, a highly critical, self-absorbed partner or family member walks into the finished space. Instead of acknowledging your hard work, they immediately point out a microscopic flaw in the wood, criticize your choice of paint, and seamlessly make the entire conversation about their vastly superior aesthetic taste. In the old days, that single critique would have crushed your spirit. You would have felt a sickening wave of doubt, perhaps even scrambling to repaint the walls or apologizing for your lack of vision. Your joy would have been instantly extinguished, but grounded in your new reality, you experience the interaction entirely differently. You look at the beautiful sturdy furniture you built with your own hands. You look at the vibrant colors that reflect your own unique vision. And then you look at their desperate, tragic need to diminish your light in order to make themselves feel taller. You gently reply, "I am incredibly proud of how this turned out and I love the way it feels." You let their criticism hang awkwardly in the empty air. You do not absorb it, and you absolutely do not let it steal your joy. Your energy remains fiercely protected, reserved only for the beautiful things you are actively building in your own life. As you continue to practice this profound emotional independence, you will discover that you are no longer defined by the friction of the past. You begin to look forward to the vast, open horizon of your own future. The mental space that was once consumed by rehearsing arguments and analyzing their toxic behavior is now filled with the anticipation of your own adventures. You find yourself excitedly planning long journeys, perhaps checking train schedules and anticipating the rhythmic, soothing motion of the tracks, carrying you toward ancient, beautiful cities. You realize that the world is incredibly large and that your life is meant to be spent exploring it, not shrinking yourself to fit inside someone else's narrow, fear-driven demands. The ultimate gift of this entire journey is the unshakable relationship you have finally forged with yourself. You have walked through the fire of an incredibly difficult dynamic, and you have emerged not hardened, but profoundly clear. You have learned that true empathy does not require self-destruction. You have discovered that you can look at the wounded child behind the armor with deep compassion, while simultaneously defending your own boundaries with the ferocity of a seasoned warrior. You will no longer abandon yourself to keep someone else comfortable. The difficult person may remain in your life, or they may fade into the distance as you bravely walk away. They may continue to wear their masks, stage their dramatic performances, and try to draw you back into the chaotic theater of their unhealed pain. But they can no longer cast an illusion over your eyes. You see the world as it truly is, and more importantly, you see yourself as you truly are, a deeply resilient, profoundly powerful human being. You have weathered the storm, you have held your ground, and you are finally entirely free to thrive.